Hello, I'm Citrus, and you're looking at Yolopark's AMK Series Evangelion Test Type 01. The box says this is a model kit, but as we open it up, you can see it's kind of more just an action figure that is partially disassembled. This kit, or figure shall we say, is due to be released in December 2024, and you can currently pre-order it on Yolopark's website. Link in the description and pinned comments below. I suppose you could technically call this a pre-production sample, but I'm pretty sure this is fairly close to what the retail product is going to be like. Starting with the packaging, we have a fairly sturdy matte cardboard box. And on the back we have some information about the manufacturer, the materials, cautions, a barcode, and the contents of the figure inside. And this same picture of all three Ava units. Yolopark is a Chinese company, but this is an officially licensed Kara product. Let's get it open. Aside from the clamshell, you get two bits of paper. One is a customer service card with links to their social media, written in Chinese and English. And the other piece is a very simple set of instructions for assembly. So to call this a model kit is, I would say, a little bit of a stretch, considering that most of this building really is done for you. And inside you get two trays. The bottom one is kind of a display stand thing. The base is actually a container that will hold all of the accessories of the figure. And all of the parts of the figure itself are in the top tray. The clamshell looks really cool, especially when you see it through the window of the box, showing off all the parts. But once you build the figure, it becomes completely useless for storage. And also, the halves are held together by these plastic tagging pins in several places on both clamshells. You'll have to clip them out. It's really hard to see and find all of them on the tray as you're getting it open. And of course, it's just unnecessary junk that you'll have to keep track of on your desk, unless you don't mind it flying away and landing your carpets or whatever. Now, I know the 20 centimeter size is pretty large, but I can't help but wonder if maybe Yolopark could have packaged all the pieces of this in a more intelligent and less wasteful way. In any case, Yolopark, if you are watching, there's still time. Maybe you can get rid of the little tag pins on the clamshells and just replace it with tape or something. I'm sure that'll hold everything together just fine. All right, so let's get all the parts taken out and put this together. The 20 centimeter height of the assembled figure is pretty impressive. You can see it next to a metal build Evangelion and, just for reference, a master grade RX-78. Starting with the EVA 1 we just finished, the antenna doesn't really stay in place super well, and it is generous that the kit includes 3 of them, but if you glue this in place and the one antenna that's glued in breaks, then you're not going to have a very fun time replacing them. So you're kind of between a rock and a hard place, figuring out exactly how to make the antenna stay where it's supposed to. Up close, you can see it's almost as if either the peg is too long or the hole is not deep enough. For the time being, I added just a little bit of white glue onto the peg to hopefully give it a bit more purchase so that it doesn't fall out, at least for the rest of the video. You can see that a lot of the details on the body are actually painted in. And you can see that in the places where it's good, the lines are quite clean. But some places are a bit inconsistent. And there are also, unfortunately, paint smudges. And also some places where the glue that they've used in assembly has been applied just a little too excessively. The camera is also picking up a slight difference in tone between the purple that's painted and the purple that's plastic. The choice to paint the bottom of the face a metallic purple is a bit strange. As far as I know, every incarnation of the EVA 1 has a grayish colored face that kind of matches the other gray details on the rest of the body, so strange choice there. From a distance, the overall effect is pretty good, but once you get up close, the craftsmanship doesn't really stand up to scrutiny very well. If everything goes smoothly, it is a pretty quick and simple affair, but there were several places that really fought me. One of them is the lower waist joint here. Another one was the head. Most of the joints that you have to assemble are all ball joints, which is fine. Nothing wrong with ball joints on an action figure. A lot of them don't pop in with any definite sound or tactile feedback. So when you are actually putting this together, it kind of feels like some of the joints are only partially seated or not all the way in place. And now that we are moving the figure around, you can see that the mobility is not too bad, but some places are incredibly stiff. So for example, this upper ball joint is pretty alright, and there's one in the chest too, pretty okay. And the one at the neck and in the head, they can all move around just fine. Even the hips, once you break them in a little bit, they'll creak in the beginning like this, but at least the movement is fairly smooth and the joint strength is pretty good. But the lower ball joint right here is incredibly stiff. And it's on top of quite a long post as well. So it almost feels like you'll break the figure at various points. You can also see this is what I'm talking about, where it feels like the ball joint isn't fully seated into the socket. And you push it all the way down as far as it can go, but it kind of just stays, and you don't really know if it's caught or not. It doesn't inspire too much confidence. Now the knees have a pretty good bend right here, but another QC issue. So the top one on the left leg bends fine, and the bottom, oh my goodness. I can bend it about that far, and it feels like if I bend it any more, I'm gonna break something. You can see, you can hear the sound it's making, and it just doesn't feel great. And that's basically about as far as I can make it go without really breaking something. Knee tip thing moves like that. The foot can rotate, again, quite loudly. Decent amount of tilt. Not that aggressive, unfortunately. And a rather short ball joint with the ankle guard here. You can point the toe. Well, you're supposed to be able to point the toe. There we go. Like that. Pretty typical to other Evangelion kits and figures. And back up here, All right, so this is a little bit weird. So the top of the shoulder piece here, it can move on a hinge up and down like this, but it is completely separate from the shoulder itself, which is pretty atypical. And the pylon attaches to the top of that by a small ball joint. Not too bad. But the thing is, on a lot of Evangelion action figures, this shoulder joint has the ability to move forwards and backwards. And since this is a pretty far inset ball joint, the arm itself can do that, but this purple piece on top does not move in that direction. It only goes up and down. So if you move it in the way that you would expect maybe a lot of other Evangelion figures to move, this might be a breakage point. On the bright side, the detailing on the hands look very clean. And I think the way that they handled the wrist blending into the back of the hand and into the arm actually looks quite good from most angles. And there is a gimmick on the back to open the entry plug access, whatever you want to call it. So this flips forward, and the back half comes up and also slides back. This reveals inside a little nub that is supposed to represent the entry plug, but the nub does not move. It's molded into the black plastic and it does not come out. It does look a little bit small to be in the correct scale, but at least it makes an attempt to replicate the detail, which some figures, like even the metal build, doesn't even bother with. Looking at the other ones, this is Eva 00, which again, from a distance, looks pretty good. Once you get up close, the left side looks correct, but the right side does not. And that's because the sleeve that came on the right arm is actually also for the left arm. So bit of a glaring QC error there. The left leg on this one is also quite stiff at the knee, and basically it's about the same. I can't really bend it anymore. Same issue on this one, also with an extremely tight lower joint. Hard to seat, very creaky, very stiff, and you're just not really sure if it's all the way in there because, I don't know, it just kind of looks like it's sticking up a little bit too much. On this one, because the joint in the head is also really recessed, pushing it onto the ball joint inside was also a huge struggle, almost as if the socket was just a little bit too small for the joint. But otherwise, you can see the details are mostly pretty clean. A little bit of spillage, but nothing too egregious. Very clean details on the hands. Just like on Eva 01, you can see there is a slight difference between the yellow on the plastic and the yellow that is painted. And lastly, we have Eva 02, which has a pretty large, well, I'm not really sure what that is. I guess it's from the gate mark on the piece sticking off there. This was the first of the three that I assembled, but quality-wise, this one is the best of the bunch. I don't really think there should be any reason that one particular figure should be better than the others. So I really think it's just a matter of quality control, not being super consistent. Another strange thing is the elbow. You can see there's this little nub that is molded over the lower joint, which if I straighten the arm, you can see prevents it from bending backwards. But it doesn't extend up to the upper joint for some reason. So when you're bending the arm, it can do that. And on the back is a pretty large glob of excess glue there. The paint errors are not so hard to fix, but this is a bit more difficult. At least to my eyes, the difference between the red plastic and the red paint is the most minimal. And here is the stand, also assembly required. The seams on the posts are kind of difficult to get completely flush. This is despite my best efforts to make sure that everything is pressed together tightly, but there's always just going to be a little bit of a gap without some maybe grinding down on the inside there. The upper portions of the posts can slide a little bit. So if you pull like that, So that's like kind of an upper position, and then that is the original compressed position. And because the joint is only along this rail here, it's kind of easy to move them or bump them in such a way that they're no longer parallel to each other or the rest of the stand, which just looks a little bit wonky. There are also some teeth on the inside of the slot that imply that they should be grabbing onto something, but if you lay the figure into the stand, you can see that it kind of just slides around in there, so they don't really do anything. And also, if you look at it from the front, the stand almost looks like it's too narrow. The hips barely fit inside of the width of the posts. Now, I left the bottom of the base off, which, as I mentioned before, can be used as a container to hold the figure's accessories. We'll look at those in a second. But I left it off because there is yet another small problem, which is when you close it up to the bottom of the base. And I'm just going to go ahead and press it down completely. And as you see, all the way around, there are no notches or anything for you to really grab onto to be able to remove it from the base again without pulling very hard. Which, unfortunately, if your base happens to be full of said accessories that I just emptied, having to pull this hard to open it will send them flying everywhere. So, not a very good solution. And looking at the accessories, we start with the power cable, which is quite short. The big end goes into the base like so, and the plug goes into the back of the figure. The length is also a bit questionable. If I plug it into the back of the Eva like so, you can see that the cable is barely long enough to even match the length of the legs. Most figures and kits that include the power cable usually give it some considerable length in order for it to like wrap around or settle on the ground a little bit more naturally, whereas this kind of just goes straight into the base. And because the only connection for a stand is on the back, and realistically the cable has to go into the base here, even if you use a stand that has like some kind of waist grip or something like that, you're going to be fighting for space between where the aerial stand goes for stabilizing the actual figure and where this cable goes and this base relative to that stand. So being able to use this as a part of display is going to be tricky. All three figures come with the same 4 pairs of hands. You have closed fists, slightly open holding hands, relaxed hands, and then splayed hands. Personally, I'm very happy with how these all look. The molding is quite sharp, easy to clean up if you do want to clean up the little bit of flash that is on the fingertips, and the painting is very, very crisp and clean. I really can't ask for any better hands than these. And as for the accessories the hands can hold, each figure also comes with a gun of some type and a pair of knives. Eva 00 and Eva 01 come with the same type of gun and knives, while Eva 02 has its own style of these accessories. All three figures also come with this entry plug, but it's too small to fit into the gripping hand, and it's also way too big to match the size of the nub that's inside of the figure, so don't really know what you're supposed to do with these. As an overall package, I think Yolopark's AMK series is an interesting release wrapped in a bunch of very strange decisions. I don't really know what value was gained by shipping these as only partially assembled. It would make more sense to me if these figures just came fully assembled so that their boxes and the packaging can all be used to store the figure again if you decide to put it away after displaying or playing with it for a while. Or they could just save the cost of assembly completely and ship these as just proper model kits that you have to cut out of the runner and assemble yourself. And if they wanted to leave the parts pre-painted, they can do that. That said, if we just ignore QC for a minute, I think these are reasonably good value These retail for 30 US dollars, and shipping starts at just 7. If you add in sales tax, you're looking at 40 US dollars to get the figure to your door. At that price, I don't know if there is an Evangelion figure you can buy that is of a comparable size, appearance, or quality. For a lot of collectors, the size alone is probably a pretty big appeal. For the new or casual Evangelion fan, especially someone who has a small collection, these are very affordable, they're well featured, and the weak storage ability of the packaging is much less of a concern because you have fewer items competing for all of your display space. And even if you're not, these still make for pretty good office or desk decor without much risk or worry. They're large, they're fairly sturdy, so you don't have to worry about any careless coworkers or children or animals really messing them up too much. And they let you show off your personality in an inviting way, because if someone comes by and like, hey, what is that? You can offer this to them to pick it up and touch it a little bit. And this is maybe a bit of a niche use, but if you're into fountain pens, these guys are actually pretty good at being pen holders. If Kid Me bought one of these for $30 back in the day instead of one of Bandai's LMHG model kits as my very first Eva toy, I would have been absolutely ecstatic. But of course, all of this is marred by the QC issues. From my research, Yolopark is pretty good about answering customer service requests, and I have reached out to my contact there about getting replacement parts. But no matter how good their service is, I would much prefer they put the effort towards making these figures better in the first place. So all that said, I can only give this a tepid recommendation. If you don't mind the possibility of your example not being perfect, if you don't care too much about the potential flaws your figure could have, these are a great way for you to spend not very much money to get your hands on a pretty good Evangelion toy. Otherwise, you're probably better off saving your money to buy something a little bit more premium. If you're willing to spend, the quality ceiling pretty much goes to the stars. So that's all for this review. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.